Start streaming. Let me bring these guys up. Oh, good afternoon, everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Cioffi and
meteorologist Andrew Pinero.
Andrew's my colleague here where I work, and where we both work. And we are looking at, of course, a lot of weather going on with some snow. We just came from outside, took a little observation. It looked like there was a nice little, half-inch coating. You're probably going to double that, a whole inch of snow for us. But actually, there are some places nearby that are snowing pretty good. So let me say good. Let's say good morning. We got a usual round of regulars are on this morning, like Garo Vestas. Good morning to you, and Dio Nand Kumar, Mirtha Gunta. She's in Western North Carolina. Danielo Yakubov. I've been up since 4 a.m., folks, so I'm a little slow on the uptake. And Christopher, you can't access the stream. I'm there. You should be able to see me. Okay, and Iron Mine 10, Lidl Griffin is on. Hey, Stephen Franco, you got some slick spots out there on Long Island. I'll probably be driving in them before too long. And Wayne S. is here, Anne-Marie Passaretti. So all of you guys, I didn't want to leave out jcweather.net from Johnson City, New York. Boy, we do get, we get a varied audience, by the way, Andrew, from all over the place. We've got folks from that watch from Ireland, from England, from Scotland, from the Canadian Maritimes, and even from Cambodia, believe it or not.
International.
Very international. We are going to start local. And by the way, for those of you watching in the Canadian Maritimes, stick around because there could be something, an important storm for you guys later next week, the way weather models are playing out. But we'll start first off with what's going on at the moment. And we do have a peppering of winter weather advisories up over our neck of the woods. So we're talking Long Island and the southern half of New Jersey. There's a stretch, by the way, in central New Jersey that has been getting a fair amount of snow today. Much of southern Pennsylvania, except the southwest, because the snow's over with there. And we also have some winter storm warnings up for lake effect snows that are going on the eastern shores of Lake Michigan, which, by the way, is a dream of mine one day to be able to go up to lake effect land with a lawn chair and just like sit it there with my parka and move on out. Notice, you start to look at I've got the temperatures and the wind up there, and looks like another Arctic blast getting ready to come in.
Yeah, the temperatures we were watching coming down from Canada, they're some of the coldest we've seen pretty much all season and maybe even all year.
I think each air mass that we've gotten has gotten actually progressively colder, which is hard to believe. Now, these are temperatures right now at 10 a.m. Eastern time across Minnesota. I mean, minus 20, minus 24. Trying to see if we can get these. Sometimes I can get the specific spots to pop up and tell us exactly what the city is, because my almost 60-year-old eyes have a very tough time seeing. And you know what? I think this is going to be an exercise in futility, but we can just leave it at the fact that these are actual air temperatures that are running 10 or more below zero through the Dakotas, Minnesota, into northwestern Wisconsin. So this is really brutal air that is coming down.
So I was looking at some of those winds that, if you move it up a little bit more this way.
Okay, let's get right up here.
Yeah, there were some of those winds getting up here.
Oh, look at that. Yeah, I mean, gusting to 47, coming off the lake on the northern shores of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Yeah, they're blowing away there with heavy snow squalls. I bet we'll probably see those on the radar a little later. There's some Canadian temperatures popping on too. Again, look at these, minus 25, minus 27, minus 29. I mean, this is really brutal air. We've got also some winter storm warnings and winter weather advisories up for most of Montana on up into northern Idaho. And then, of course, you get to the other side of the continental... I'm sorry, I'm moving the wrong map. Here we go. And you get to the other side of the Continental Divide, and, on the west coast where it is 9 a.m., and they're seeing their temperatures come off their lows, which were basically in the 30s and 40s. And along the coast, San Diego looks like they're a balmy 63 at the moment. So they're going to be bouncing up pretty quickly as far as their temperatures go. So the west is quiet. Why don't we give a quick look to Florida to get everybody upset? We'll go across the south. You can see the cold air, by the way, has penetrated down into northern parts of Texas and Oklahoma. We also have, by the way, winter weather advisories and hard freeze watches up for Mississippi, parts of Mississippi, Alabama, because of potential ice. That although they're calling it a minor event, well, you know, down there, if they get 0.100th of an inch of ice, it's probably shut down the entire state. And in Florida, it's in the 50s and 60s, so, you know, I can't even fathom that right now. So why don't we take a look at, let's go to the radar. If it will just let me go. Doesn't want to let go. All right, so I got everything separated. So let's go to the, we'll go punch up the Northeastern Radar view here, the regional view. And this area of snow here is really pretty small, but where you see those darker green echoes, that's probably where you have snow falling, you know, close to a moderate rate, and it appears right now it's all beginning to shift to the New Jersey coast.
And the other thing too is with Long Island, especially once we get a little bit more to the Twin Forks region, that's where you can see maybe a couple more bursts of some snow coming out of this. But really the coastal regions, that's where it's, whether it's the Jersey Shore, South Shore of Long Island, going into the shore of Connecticut, that's where some of the more higher totals, but still the high totals aren't that much today.
It looks like some lake effect might be starting up along Lake Ontario there. There's it's a little hard to see, but there's this east-west band that's building across the lake and moving eastward. So that might eventually come ashore later this afternoon into tonight somewhere, maybe up in north central New York around Pulaski, Watertown. We'll see how that goes. Also, there's some activity in southwestern New York State and in southwestern Pennsylvania down into West Virginia, seeing some snow on the regional radar view. And I think I have a U.S. view here somewhere. Oh, now it wants to bury us to the radar image. Ah, here we go. So let's bring this up to the top. I need to learn how to go to sleep. Here's the radar view nationwide, and you can see the snows in the winter storm warning areas up through much of Montana. And you know, one of the things that struck me over the last couple of weeks, by the way, just to show you, just to kind of illustrate how dry the overall pattern is and how overwhelming all this cold, dry air is, I cannot really remember a stretch where we've seen an absence of at least one, I won't even call it a major storm, even a moderate storm system of some nature. It seems like we're in this pretty long period here where there's been an absolute absence of activity across the country. What do you think that might be caused by?
That's probably because of the trough that's coming down from Canada, bringing in that really cold air. Once you get really cold air, it tends to be also really dry. So that's that air that's just coming down, that Arctic air mass, that's pretty much just drying out anything. And if there is even little echoes coming up, they're probably drying out before it even gets to the ground.
But the cold air in terms of the jet stream is coming out, because we've been cold before, obviously, but the cold air is coming down in such a way, the jet stream is orienting itself in such a way that it's cutting off moisture sources. Here's a Pacific satellite view, and there is activity on it. Looks like there's a pretty good storm well to the east of the Californian coast and also up to the Pacific Northwest, but it doesn't seem as if they're going eastward. They're kind of starting to lift more northeastward and northward, and that's a big problem, because you can't get the energy from that doesn't come into the United States. It gets deflected up into the Gulf of Alaska.
It's almost like a blocking pattern setting up, but just with the jet stream itself.
Well, yeah, it's kind of put itself in this position where it keeps delivering cold air masses, and you know, that's it, and it hasn't really moved very much. So we're going to bring up the weather models. We have the new GFS model, And we're going to look ahead to Sunday, and of course New Year's Day, and next week, because we do have essentially we have two Arctic air masses to work through, two more blasts of cold air that are going to impact the weather across the eastern 2/3 of the United States. So let's show everybody. So we've got our new GFS, and the other thing is, in between those two Arctic air masses there's going to be what appears to be a major storm that's going to develop in the Atlantic, and it would also seem that it will be an offshore event more than anything else, but this could wind up being a pretty big storm for places like Nova Scotia and toward Newfoundland.
And on the GFS that we'll show you in a minute, but the pressure center was getting pretty low for what we would expect for somewhere in December going into January.
Yeah, very low indeed. Okay, so here's our weather system moves out, and here's that first Arctic blast that comes in. So we've got basically brutal air coming into the eastern part of the United States again. In the west, it's very calm, and so here's what I'm talking about. Almost coast to coast, there's hardly any, outside of lake effect snows, coast to coast, very little going on for the daytime going into Monday and Tuesday. And this is really really illustrates just how overwhelming the cold air is. It just takes encompasses everything, and all the moisture shut off. So let's describe. Why don't you describe what's going to be coming out of your Florida here? We're up to Wednesday morning.
So the precipitation that you see over the Caribbean going into South Florida there, that's going to start to form into a low pressure center. And it does kind of have characteristics of kind of a tropical system.
Does give you that look,
yeah,
doesn't it?
Does kind of give that look, but it's not.
It's not truly tropical.
But it does give that kind of look, and especially once it starts to follow the East Coast north.
Right, which we'll do right now.
The pressure center really drops, and that's that bombogenesis that you've probably heard us talk about before.
Right. The number you see near the low, 976, is the pressure in millibars, so you can follow it. I'll just run it back. So here we are. This is Wednesday afternoon. We're at 1,008 millibars, and then by the time we get to Thursday morning, we're at 965. I mean, that's a huge pressure drop. That's 35, 43 millibars in about 24 hours time. That's almost rapid strengthening for a tropical system.
Yeah.
So there's your low, and you can see how offshore it is. You can see how the model has this kind of back edge of some snow for back to coastal New England, over to about Long Island, but just east of the New Jersey coast. And everything here says close call but a miss as far as I see it.
Yeah, I'm kind of seeing the same thing too, especially the way the models have been trending when we kind of follow it from run to run. The way it's kind of trending is not really onshore. It does have a little bit of a westerly pull,
but we had a big westward shift in the models last night.
Yeah.
Didn't really see too much of that today. Why don't we switch over to the if it's out, it should be, usually it is out far enough. Let's look at a comparison with the Canadian model. And here's the Canadian model, which is only unfortunately,
10?
it is not out far enough. It looks like it's only out, usually by now the Canadian is done, but they've been having some ongoing problems at CMC. So it appears we're not going to have it for this live stream. So back to the GFS we go. We'll try again in a little bit. Maybe it'll magically appear. Okay, so there's your low at the end of the week. Now, one thing this low does do is that we have yet another brutally cold air mass coming down. And depending on how this low moves out and moves toward the northeast is probably going to determine how extreme this cold shot is, because I still think, even though the model seems to have backed off a little bit on the extremity of the cold, I still think this has the potential of being the coldest of the three shots for the northeastern part of the United States. Less so, this last shot is going to have less of an impact in the Midwest and plains, where our other Arctic air masses have been coming down. This one is going to have its impact more in the eastern part of the U.S.
And that's because with the low pressure system, you have counterclockwise rotation. So around the back side of the low, that's where you have pretty much winds coming right down from the north, and that's bringing this colder air in.
Well, the north wind direction is important because a straight north wind here is, this is bitter air that's going to be in southeastern Canada, and that's going to advect almost straight southward. It doesn't really have a lot of time, or it's not traveling over a large area of land or mountainous terrain in order to modify. It's just going to completely come straight down. So we're going to watch this because this may wind up being the coldest of the air masses for the east. And folks, you'll notice that there is some activity going on in the west, because I think once we work our way through this round of cold air at the end of next weekend, I think we're going to see the pattern modify a little bit. But why don't we go look at southeastern Canada, because this potential Atlantic storm looks to be rather formidable for southeastern Canada. And here's I'm going to make this a little smaller so we can get a better view of the whole area with regards to its impacts on Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. But here we have that low, which, even though it's far enough offshore, according to the GFS anyway, lessening the impact to the eastern U.S., except for maybe Maine and down into southeastern New England. But this low gets very deep, and you'll notice that there's some heavy snow approaching Nova Scotia, and we've got this low down to a 950. I mean, that's a Category 3 hurricane in terms of pressure. And up it goes. So it looks like it's going to be rather intense and go in between, at least on this model run, it seems to go in between Newfoundland and Nova Scotia. And that's going to be, snow to rain for parts of Newfoundland, heavy snow for parts of New Brunswick and for Nova Scotia. This is for the end of next week. I've been doing this more and more and learning, because we don't often pay attention to the specific meteorology of those areas, and things behave in very weird ways up there sometimes. And there we go out toward Greenland and beyond. So you want to know how much snow they get?
Yeah, let's take a look.
So that's the GFS snowfall. Look at these numbers. This is cumulative snowfall for the next 8 days. And
still assuming the 10-to-1 ratio.
Right. And, I've said many times when it comes to these snowfall maps, take them as, at this point, you cannot really take them as literal. But I think with the idea of this major storm, we are looking at some pretty hefty snow amounts. Now, what I did put on now is what's called the positive change, which is supposed to account for melting and any other factors. And by the way, these are numbers in centimeters and not inches. But we're talking, 15 to 30 centimeters over a good chunk of northwestern Newfoundland and down into parts of Labrador and southern Quebec province. So this looks like a pretty good round of snow with this big storm for that part. And wind, I think, is going to be a big deal too, with that incredibly tight pressure gradient.
Yeah, so it's probably not going to be anything in the U.S., just a little glancing blow. But once you get up to Canada, that's probably where we're going to see the more significant snow.
We can go to the snow map for the U.S. now, based on what we see coming up in the next 7 or 8 days. And again, the impacts of that coastal low, it's going to depend on the track, but at least from the GFS's standpoint right now, it's confined to the immediate coast of New England and maybe down to Long Island. But notice that everybody pretty much north of 40 degrees north latitude is getting some kind of snow over the next 7 or 8 days. It's just pretty, this is when you would sort of expect it now. The snow machines are going to be working from coast to coast for the most part.
And it also seems climatologically like once we get more into February, that's kind of where it seems to be the heart of the snow. At least from what I've seen over the past couple of years, with more snowstorms or the significantly accumulating snowstorms in February.
Well, let's go to the upper air, and I want you to comment. I'll run the sequence, and let's look out into the longer range once it's done loading, and tell me what you think is going to happen to the overall pattern going forward. Because at some point we have to see the extreme nature of this pattern relax. But tell me describe what you see. I'll run it through. You describe what the upper air looks like, and tell me what you think about where we're going to be in the next couple of weeks.
So the cold air is really going to start to, I call it model modulation. Yes. So essentially what happens is when the atmosphere has to get an equilibrium, so we've had lots and lots of cold, so eventually we do have to see a little bit more moderate temperatures kind of come in.
When you say, all right, when you say equilibrium in terms of the structure of the jet stream, okay, we've been so out of equilibrium, and when we are out of equilibrium, what happens with these troughs and ridges? You know, the ridges pop strongly all the way up on one side. The troughs drive deeply all the way down the other. So we're basically going to be looking at the jet stream to kind of flatten out a little bit. The flow maybe not coming directly from the North Pole. Maybe it comes from northwestern Canada, where it might be cold, but it won't be as cold.
Yep. And then maybe once it gets to almost equilibrium, that's called zonal flow. So we may see then pretty much west to east flow. So it's fairly moderate temperatures at that point.
Here's our trough for Wednesday's storm. And one of the issues is the fact that if you look closely off the Florida coast, you can see where the lines kink up. That's that southern stream system. It doesn't quite phase with all the northern energy that's lined up from the Great Lakes down to the Florida Panhandle. You kind of need that all phased in.
Yeah.
And yet, at the same time, sometimes when you have the system that's sort of a separate entity, it's a little unusual to see all that intensity in terms of what it's showing. So it's kind of a bit on the, I don't want to say weird, might be overstating it, but you could see it maintains its identity separate from the northern stream. And I think that's what argues against this being a full blown out snowstorm for the Northeast, and not just the coast, but maybe further inland.
Because if it phased, it would have this kind of left-hand turn into the coast.
Right. So what we're going to be looking for going forward is if the models not only have that westward shift, but now we have to see if it remains a separate entity, or are subsequent model runs going to start to show more of a phase. I think the argument, the way I look at it is, you know, the history of what's going on in the last couple of months would suggest that it will not phase. Would you agree with that?
I think so. It still may have a tad bit more of a westward trend, but I still don't think it's going to phase into anything else. They're going to stay two separate entities.
Now that once it goes by, we're still not in equilibrium yet.
Right.
And that's the last Arctic air push that comes into the east, and you see it here.
Almost like a bullseye there.
But once that kicks out, what happens?
This is where we're seeing this kind of equilibrium come into place. The lines, if you see in the middle, once they become pretty much west to east, that's what's called the zonal flow, and that's where it becomes a little bit more stable. And we're not really seeing this harsh cold air coming from Canada, or this unseasonably warm air coming from the southwest. So it becomes kind of seasonal for when we're expecting that.
And one of my takeaways from this too is the fact that it relaxes, though at the same time you still have a little semblance of a northern jet that remains, that it does allow for more room for weather systems to play out across the U.S. as opposed to just, you know, stopping or just not forming at all, as we've seen with the overwhelming Arctic jet that we've had. So everybody on my YouTube channel knows that at this point we are out at day 11, which is basically squirrel land, the way I look at it, because the variations of the models get so wide at this point that run-to-run changes can be huge. It does look like it wants to at least, you know, perhaps trend back toward average. You still, toward the end of the period, however, seems, after sort of a brief break, you do seem to want to go back. It seems to want to go back to a ridge in the west, troughing in the east. Any opinions about that?
Again, I don't really trust anything really past 5 or 7 days. So just because it changes so much, and especially with the GFS, once you get out past, I believe, a week, the time period or the interval between each frame is also 12 hours, I think, versus 6. So we're also seeing not as clear of a picture as we see in the earlier ones.
All right, so we do have the Canadian on the upper air. Maybe we'll have the surface too. So let's see if we can figure out, what the Canadian has with this system for next week. So we're into Monday now. So the first Arctic air mass is playing through. Now here's the troughing that develops with the Canadian, and it would seem like the Canadian might have maybe a bit more of a phase. I don't know, or is it maybe that it's separate, but it might be pulled back a little further west. What do you think?
It's still, at least through there, it's that there looks a bit more phasing, but a couple of frames before, it looked like it was still separate.
All right, let's see. Right in there, I think I think you're right. It is still separate, but it does seem a little bit closer. So let's see what it does at the surface. And there's your last shot of cold air. Well, that's what the GFS is the last shot of cold air. Let's see if the Canadian does the same idea. Now, see, the Canadian wants to drop another upper low into southeastern Canada by day 9 and 10. So it might have a slightly different look than the GFS does at that point. But you know what? Let's jump back now. Let's go to the surface. Let's change regions, and that's the last. Is that the? Oh, it's not there yet. It's got the upper air, but it doesn't have the surface. Oh, this is so disappointing. You know what? Maybe it has it for that region. Maybe it has the surface for that region. Let's give it a try. Otherwise, it's forever going to Nope. None of the surface maps are updated. Do we have? Let's try this. The 10-meter wind. Okay, this we have for the wide. Do we have it for the tight? Fingers crossed, Andrew. Yep, it's loading.
Yeah.
It's popping. Okay, good. So, but while it's loading, I can start moving. All right. So we're going to start with here's today. So this is actually the surface Canadian model with the 10-meter wind. So here's our wind. By the way, it's going to get pretty windy here for tomorrow into Monday. So not only do we have this brutal cold air, but we're going to have wicked wind chills to deal with.
And that brings up the frostbite factor.
That it does. And you know what? I'm glad you brought that up because I want to put the link up for everybody. Andrew's got a really interesting view of frostbite on your hand.
So essentially, in this video explainer I uploaded, it was probably the beginning of this year. I went outside. I was about 10 minutes outside with just my exposed hand, and temperature's about the same as this morning. And I have a thermal imager plugged into my phone, and you could see the thermal temperatures of my fingertips versus my wrist, and it's getting to near the freezing point at my fingertips.
And it happens pretty quickly.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to pull that link up in just a second, but in the meantime, let's move along with this, and let's see what the Canadian does with the storm. So there it is, near the Bahamas, moves northeast, and it looks like it has it, far out, but there's southeast of Cape Cod. We could probably match it up to the GFS just to see. And of course, then we'll have the European to look at. Looks like it might be a little further north. Let me jump back. Looks like it's northwest of the GFS, so it might be a little bit faster.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's not far enough west to have an impact for, say, coastal New Jersey, Long Island, or maybe it does have an impact in parts of Long Island. But this position might have interesting implications for southeastern New England and on up into Maine.
I'm wondering, was with the Canadian, it was showing a tad bit more phasing than the GFS did.
Right.
I wonder if that's also increasing the speed as well.
That could very well. And by the way, notice that for you folks in Nova Scotia, the low is actually tracking further west at this point than the GFS. But the winds here in the purple areas, that's all sustained winds of greater than 52 knots. So this model would suggest a very strong wind event as well as a snow and rain event for Nova Scotia, although the track on this is further west, much further west. It took it, the other model, the GFS took it between Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. This takes it to the western areas of Nova Scotia, but we can't see the surface implications, but at least we saw in terms of precipitation, but at least we can see this low actually goes up much further to the left than what the GFS does. And that might impact, by the way, how cold it gets here in the east. So let's, at this point, why don't you, while you're running through comments, because I want you to introduce yourself to everybody, including my regulars, I am going to find your YouTube video, and we can see if I can run it from here while we're on. So we're going to live stream your video.
Live stream.
Exactly. So let me, first of all, here we are. So let me get that over there. And we'll go back and look at some of these comments. And again, thanks very much for all of you that are here today. Ian Simpson wants the track to be further to the west. We do have time for models to shift, do we not?
Yeah, we still got a bit of time until Thursday, it looks like.
Taco Bell is in the Idaho Panhandle, and 5 inches of snow there under cloudy skies, so it's not just us, it's them. We've got some Long Island reports too, so you might want to, let's see, I'm trying to see if we got any, want to get a good question for you. Minus 45C, thanks for that information. I'm sorry, I lost that ob. Somebody put up that it was minus 45 degrees.
Move it down. There.
Oh, okay. That was Ian Simpson. Thank you, buddy. We simply need a slight westward shift, says Adam Fitz. And, well, you know, let's talk about that. What has to happen for that that slight westward shift to occur? What has to happen in the jet stream in order for you to see that?
I would still think that we're part of that phasing. So the jet stream, once you're getting that pretty much due north flow coming out of Canada, if it's ever so slightly maybe more west, you'll be able to pull in that low pressure a little bit more.
And you know, sometimes you get phasing and sometimes you don't. What drives that? You know, I oftentimes wonder. You could have almost something that looks exactly the same, and yet sometimes you get a phase and sometimes you don't. And sometimes the models will phase it on one run and then not phase it on the next. What drives all that, you think?
So an easier way to kind of think of it is that you have a pool, and then you have these little eddies or little whirlpools inside there. When they pass by each other, you're kind of seeing what's called that phasing. It has to do with one kind of touching and pulling in the other. It has to do really with the strength. So we're seeing with the jet stream, it's pretty strong with that northerly flow coming out of Canada. However, with the low pressure, if it's not entirely close enough, it won't pull in all of that, and it won't actually move more west. So it has to do with how close they are as well.
Okay. Now, I'm going to try something here, folks. So let me see. I got Andrew's video up, and you should be able to see him. I don't know if you guys can at least let me know if you can hear him. That would help me, as I know you. I know you'll be able to see him, but I'm going to start this back from the beginning, and let me know if you were able to see or hear. You should be able to see. Hearing may be another matter. So let's give it a try. Oh, they can hear it, but they can see it, but they can't hear it. So, no audio. Okay, I got to figure that part of the equation out.
Now, you can just jump to the thermal imagers, though.
They may not be able to hear us. Okay, I don't think they're going to even be able to. I don't know if they're able to hear us. Can they? Yes, I think. Okay, let's jump to the thermal images. Okay, so there's the thermal image. Well, there was a thermal image. Let's get a little closer. Okay, so why don't you? Is this where the thermal image starts?
Yeah.
Okay, so explain what's going on.
So this is showing pretty much the image outside, and it's showing the railing there was about 11 degrees. And then this is where I move my hand into view of the thermal imager, showing my fingertips just a tad bit over 32 degrees. And that's pretty much right at the edges of my finger. Then I move to my wrist, and that's showing still about 50 degrees. So this is where we're seeing, I forgot the exact medical term for it, but essentially when your body gets cold, your body tends to restrict blood flow to your extremities, your fingers, your toes, and your feet, and in worst cases, your whole hand. So this is where it's trying to keep all the blood flow in your chest, your core, to keep that warm.
How long did it take for the temperature of your hand to drop down to that?
I was out there maybe about 10 minutes. This is what another colleague of ours, his name's Addison Green, another meteorologist. So we were out there maybe just 10 minutes, and then that's when my hands are just out there.
So it certainly is very true that when you're out in extreme conditions like this, frostbite can come very, very quickly.
Yeah.
It is pretty cool though to see it on the thermal image, so I'm going to put the link of the video up here in the chat, so you guys can, if you're interested, you can certainly go ahead and take a look when we're done, but not before we're done. So let me put that up there for you, and here we go. Okay, so there's Andrew's YouTube. And by all means, when you're there, subscribe to his YouTube channel, because then you not only get my live streams, you can get Andrew's live streams, and it's good to get. Well, he and I are rarely with opposing viewpoints. Alcina Al-Wazali, the UCMET model shows an interesting model run. We should check it out. Okay, one UCMET model run coming up. Let me find it. So everybody bear with me. I'm going to try and get this UCMET model up on the screen. Unless, of course, I wind up getting into trouble for doing this. So this is when now? This is the 0Z, so let's look at the 12Z. And I'll pull up the image. Oh boy. That's very interesting. Okay, so look at the UCMET. I'll pull up, first we'll get this image up, and maybe you can explain the interaction once I put it up on the screen for everybody. You can explain the interaction of those two streams again, and what the UCMET might be doing a bit differently. Of course, we have to bring the image up. No, let me try that again. Hang on. Patience, everybody. I got the UCMET here. Just a second. That's trying to load. That's why we can't see it. I'll try and do it on this one. You can tell I haven't slept very much last night. I am very tired. Unfortunately, it doesn't. Wait, is that it? There it is. It's back here. Got it.
Lots of layers.
Right. Lots of layers. Bring it up front. So, you know what? This is the UCMET at the time frame here is 12Z Thursday, so 7 a.m. Eastern Time Thursday. It has a much different look here in terms of the surface.
So it's not nearly as strong. So this is kind of that little eddies inside the pool example. That low pressure is not as strong, so it can be more easily influenced by another system. This is why it looks like in this model it's kind of a little bit more into the East Coast and heading into the Northeast. Is
it possible that, when you said before, the European, the GFS, it almost looks like it has it intensifies it in a way that you would see a tropical system. And I'm not suggesting at all that it is, but what I want to suggest perhaps is the model perhaps mistakenly treating it, or both the European and the GFS mistakenly treating it as a tropical system and intensifying it incorrectly.
Because it does come out of the tropics, so they may be applying some different variables that you would normally apply to a tropical system, but this is not. So that's possible.
So that might be a possibility then. Yeah. Okay, here's the 144-hour UCMET, which is valid for Friday morning, and it has the surface low actually in what appears to be western Maine.
And that's 977.
Right. That almost looks, the scenario that the UCMET plays actually looks, it looks to me, it just occurred to me, that the surface low that the UCMET develops is in response to the northern stream shortwave that's swinging, that's digging down and around, and that it basically does very little with that southern stream. So the other possibility is the UCMET incorrectly missing that southern stream system. So are the models deepening the right low? You follow what I'm getting at here? The European and the GFS taking that northern energy and applying it to the southern stream system. The UCMET is taking the northern stream energy and developing its own surface low from it on the mid-Atlantic coast and bringing it northward. That is a distinct difference, and an important difference.
That's why it
between
looks
the two
much
models.
different with the output.
So that actually throws in another variable in this equation, then, doesn't it?
It does.
And by the way, it just also reminds me, going back a couple of days ago, the European had. Here's you know what, I can bring this up because I think this is important. Let's bring up the European from yesterday when it had that monster low, because it not only had the one monster low, it had something else. So let's pull that up, and I'm going to go back a couple of runs. Now this is I believe this is last night's run. I want to go back. I got to find the correct one. Hopefully I'll guess it. Okay, so it's not that one. By the way, notice as I go back to subsequent runs how these models have changed for the same low. Back to western Maine, upstate New York, way to the southeast of Cape Cod, and then it backed away westward. No, there was a run, I think it was the Thursday 12Z run. Okay, that's it. Now, look very closely here. You see how it has double lows? Mm-hmm. You wonder whether at the time what the model was doing was actually recognizing both, where it has the southern stream system is the low that's further to the east, and the low center that you see back closer to the coast is a reflection of what develops from all the northern energy. So is the UCMET on to something here?
I mean, maybe, especially because this is still, what's the pressure there?
That's a 973.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's possible that there could be well, there's different takes, just like different meteorologists have different takes, different forecast models.
Yeah, it's very interesting that that this has kind of now suddenly emerged as a possibility. But the UCMET does offer an interesting alternative that I think needs to be, we have to pay attention to.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's come back to everybody on the board and just see if there were any additional comments or questions. A lot of folks expressing what kind of snow they're seeing in their areas. Jim House of Philadelphia, they closed. What is that? The Skykill? Is that how you say it? I hope I'm not saying it wrong, but please correct me on the pronunciation if I am. Closed in both directions due to multi-vehicle pileups. Yeah, the snow is deceptive. It creates a nice serene scene, but with temperatures around 20 degrees or so, it can be very problematic. Ruin Nation, how accurate is this model? I guess he's referring to the UCMET. Is it more of a winter or summer type model? You want to tackle that? Andrew?
Yeah, so the UCMET I'm not too familiar with this one, but from what I've heard, it tends to be a bit more of a summer model. Is that correct?
I kind of used it well in both situations.
Because it does seem to be one of the more neutral ones, but from what I've experienced with others, they use it more in the summer. But the mesoscale models, those are the ones that a lot of people tend to look more towards in the winter.
Right, mesoscale meaning smaller scale.
Yeah. Like the NAM is an example of a mesoscale model.
Groudon Science is calling me to task, I think. He says, didn't you say that there's no storm to be concerned with in the near future? Well, I did say, yes, I did say yesterday that based on what we had in front of us at the time and from what I thought how things would evolve, that the system for the middle of next week was off the table. I think the overnight model runs, and depending on what else we see today, might suggest that it's still off the table, but that it might be a closer shave.
Yeah, except the Ukemet is now
except for the right, because now the Ukemet is now thrown in another little monkey wrench in all of this and how it plays out. But yeah, I did, and you know, I can't deny it. You can go back on the live stream and look at the video again. It is there. But this is what happens sometimes. You know, there's variability. You know, we're still talking out 6 days into the long range. There's still going to be some model variability. And remember, we've had, over the last couple of weeks, a couple of instances where stuff changed inside 48 hours in a radical way. So this is, you know, not unusual. So, yeah. And by the way, I know, not going to be specific, just in general, there are some who, you know, kind of run and hide when their predictions don't work out. I'm not one of those people. I truly believe that when things change, you go back and look and see what it was that changed, so that you know where the error is in the future. Can I please add Andrew to your link? Can I please add, this is Taco Bell, add Andrew's link to Chad? Sure, absolutely. By all means, Taco Bell, go right ahead. David Allen, Storm Dylan, okay, and this is the UK. So we've got Storm Dylan hitting the UK. Could I check the precipitation if it will be snow? All right, let's take a look. You know, we're going to look at the UK. And Alcida also reminds us, by the way, real quick, that about the models, you know, the last couple of months with a lot of these waves with the westward trend. And yeah, that's very important. And just because the day run model of the GFS didn't shift westward doesn't mean that the next two runs won't shift, because they could, and they may shift back east. But, you know, we've got these other variables. Let's go to David Allen's question about Storm Dylan and the UK Weather Service. They name their storms. So we'll bring the GFS model back up. And all right, so let's go to, I'll bring it up full screen in just a second. There we go. Bring it up full screen. We'll bring up the GFS, and we'll go to Europe, and we'll go to precip. Whoops. A little trigger happy there. And there we go. One thing I have noticed, and I love it, by the way, there are a lot, something about, it kind of always fascinated me, now especially that I'm seeing it more and more and been doing this on a daily basis. The idea of it snowing in England just fascinates me, and I'm not quite sure why. I've always thought I was like British in a previous life, but when it snows in the you know, in Britain, in England, in Ireland, in Scotland, I've really come to appreciate it, and I'm learning. I am learning how weather works in that part of the world, because I got to tell you, Andrew, they get some strange things that go on. Okay, so here's the surface view of the GFS model, which really doesn't show. It shows mostly rain, except maybe up in northernmost Scotland. Now this is for tonight into Sunday, so let's go forward, and it doesn't look like it's showing much. I think one of the reasons is because the wind is really primarily more west rather than from the north, so you're not getting a really true shot of cold air like we did back earlier in December. Now here's another storm at Tuesday night into Wednesday that moves up into the North Sea. And just trying to get a view here. Here's one for the next one at the end of next week. Looks like a pretty deep low approaching Ireland and Wales. And maybe from this, now this is where you might wind up getting something, because that low drops southeastward, and it looks like you get into some of a northeast flow coming out from northwestern Europe on over into northern England. You are getting a bit of a northeast flow here of colder air. So you might have to look forward to that, but it doesn't seem like you're getting anything of consequence based on what this model shows, at least with regards to the short range. Christopher wants to know, if the storm shifts towards the Gulf of Maine, how significant would it be for coastal New England? You want to tackle that? If this coastal low winds up shifting close right to near coastal Maine, what would that mean for coastal New England?
So this also has to do a lot with the strength of it, even if it does move a little bit more west. If it has if it's sucking in basically a lot more southerly air, you may see it start out as a little bit of a mix, and then once it passes by, that wraparound snow will make it change over to just plain snow instead of that little bit of a mix.
On the other hand, there's a shift spot, a spot where if it shifts to, that could mean for some serious heavy snows for coastal eastern New England.
It all depends on the exact position, whether you're seeing a little bit of a mix, whether you're seeing a lot of heavy snow because you're going to see that moisture center with the cold air, or if it's a little bit more east, you'll just see that little bit of wraparound snow.
Taco Bell, just to let us know, was trying to share your YouTube link on their chat, and it didn't seem to want to post. She asked if you can give permission or post it for us. Okay.
They just want the main YouTube link URL.
Oh yeah, let me. I'll put the URL link. I thought I did before, but let me.
No, that was for that video. You can just do it for the whole YouTube channel.
Oh, okay. Let's try that. All right. So, so let me bring that up. And we'll bring up his YouTube. We'll put Andrew's YouTube channel up.
You can do /DrewMan0913.
See, you young guys all know all these secrets. DrewMan
0913.
Is that like a YouTube URL that you created?
Yeah, that was back in the high school days.
Okay, so let's try this. It says somebody just said about being a moderator. Okay, so there's the YouTube link up. I just put it up directly to his channel, so why don't you try that? She got it, so awesome. All right, so we'll wait and see if you've had success. She gives you a heart, Taco Bell. She's She's one of our regulars here, and do by all means, by the way, check out Andrew's YouTube channel. He's, you got some pretty good stuff that you have on there.
And it's not just weather, because weather's my main passion, but one of the other things I like is cars, so I do a couple car videos on there. And also, I try every Wednesday to do a weather podcast. I have a green screen studio that I built at home. So every Wednesday I try and go live at my green screen wall.
You change your own oil?
Yes, I do. I actually have a time-lapse video of me changing my oil.
You fix you change your brakes?
I have a new car this year, so I haven't had a chance to yet. But
you do your own brakes?
Yeah, depends on the brake. But pads, yeah, those I do myself.
I always say that everybody pays somebody to do something that they would rather not do, and for me, it's changing my oil. I guess I have, there are certain mechanical things that I will try. Changing my oil is not one of them, nor is changing my brakes. But Ruin Nation says changing the oil is so simple and so easy. Captive viewing captive viewing chaps. We're talking about oil changes and so on.
I mean, changing the exhaust system, that's a little different too.
And you've done that?
Yeah.
How old are you?
26.
I'm not liking you at the moment. I'm at the point in my life now where I have children that are actually almost all older than you. So, all right, folks, you know what? We're going to call it a day here. Thank you so much for being here. Be sure to go check Andrew's YouTube channel out and do subscribe to his. And if you're new to my YouTube channel today, after you subscribe to mine, you can go to Andrew's channel and subscribe to his. It's both absolutely free, doesn't cost you anything, and you get notifications when either of us put up a video. And Dio Nand Kumar just says, just found your channel, and he says it's very interesting. Excellent, excellent. So Here's what we're going to be doing. We will be live streaming on Sunday. I'll probably try and live stream tomorrow around the same time rather than in the evening. And then next week, back Monday, we'll be back to 6 o'clock Eastern Time live streams. I know a lot of folks are off New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. I am not one of those persons. I'm on a very long stretch right now, and I will not be off again until Friday.
Yeah, I know that feeling too.
All right. So thanks so much for being here. We will thank you, those of you with your comments, and if we don't see you tomorrow, Happy New Year. Try and stay warm if you're in the East, and particularly in the Northeast. And all right, keep your fingers crossed for those of you who want snow, that there's something for later Wednesday night and Thursday, and keep your fingers crossed that there's some of you that don't want snow, that the models continue to stay with a system that looks strong but just offshore. Take care, everybody.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.